Kevin Ackeroyd, CEO of Sovos. Great to have you with us today. So thanks for joining us.
Great to be here,
Um,
Susie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So there's so much happening in the world of e-invoicing in 2025, 2026. Lots of countries coming up, especially in Europe, and obviously elsewhere. So let's start off with the Sovos perspective on the next round of changes and the upcoming ViDA deadline.
Okay. Um, Changes, Susie, maybe some trends, we're seeing, corporations are realizing that, modernization has become a requisite. Everything is analog, everything is manual, everything is fragmented, everything is not integrated. So corporations have been sitting there for decades. Tax authorities around the world are also pushing for it, right? They're in the same situation. So, I think trend number one is just we are finally seeing a major push and real investment behind it on both the corporate taxpayer and the tax authority who are collecting to finally right modernize, digitize, streamline, defragment, and integrate. And that's going to be really really material. That, by the way, is a big push behind things like ViDA, which I'll get to in a minute. The second trend, I think, Susie, is inarguable, is while this is about modernization and digitization and streamlining, it's also about tax authorities are just chasing revenue harder, period, right? And whether it's non-e-invoicing related stuff in the US, like the tax codes or lowering thresholds for 1099K or the pending 1099 DA around crypto, or whether it's e-invoicing mandates around the world in Asia Pacific and in EMEA and the Middle East. While it is about digitization, it's absolutely about revenue capture, and we can't forget that.
Mhm.
Third trend I see is AI is a buzzword for sure, but it really is starting to have an impact in the tax and compliance market. Whether it's goods and services codes on setting taxes, whether it's AI for content and reg and the information reporting, whether it's AI for analytics and intellectual offerings, it is going to stop being a buzzword and start being real. I think that will hit the corporation and the vendor like Sovos side first. It won't really hit the governments. And finally, you're seeing a huge investment. I've counted over a dozen newly funded startups, and a dozen more had a capital infusion in the company. So the space is getting a lot of investment, and a lot of new companies and technology providers are coming in to fill this massive rush by governments and by corporations to finally right go fix this archaic system we live in. Not just newly funded startups and new capital infusions, but similar note, you'll continue to see more consolidation. Me, Sovos, Thomson Reuters, who's a big player, Vertex is a big player, Avalara is a big player. All of us made acquisitions specifically around e-invoicing, right, in the last 12 months. So those are some of the trends that I see, and they're going to manifest themselves in things like ViDA. And for those of the audience that are listening to you, Susie, just a quick, right, what is ViDA? ViDA is the EU's Commission's action plan for fair and simple taxation. That's how they bill it. What it's going to do is it's going to emphasize how tax authorities can use technology, per my previous point, to better align with the digital economy, i.e. modernize, simplify tax structures, fight tax fraud, and benefit businesses. And all of that sounds good, right? All of it will actually facilitate revenue capture. And it 100% is the driving force behind e-invoicing and the digital reporting behind e-invoicing as a way to achieve all this.
Yeah.
So it is a good thing. It should light a fuse, right? A lot of European governments have been slow to adopt and have had big delays. It should light a fuse under the governments. It should hopefully drive a bit more standardization.
Mhm.
Even when you see standards like PEPL, right, which is already a European standard for exchanging digital documents, that's crept a little bit. But even with that, you see every country, do something specific. So
Mhm.
it will help, it will catalyze, it'll speed us up. I'm not sure it will hit the nirvana of standardization that we all think it will. And then maybe the last thing I'd say about ViDA is it seems to be a tipping point, Susie. The corporations that have been dragging their feet on adopting technology to enable e-invoicing because the governments have been delaying, right? We've seen a floodgate over the last 6 months of the corporations that have to actually invest in the technology to comply with e-invoicing mandates. That's really, really spiked, and we're going to see that spike all through 2025. And it's becoming more and more apparent that the governments, efforts at maybe free portals, like France just pulled the plug on theirs in
Hmm.
October. Poland delayed another year because they couldn't get theirs up. So the governments aren't going to get there technology-wise. It's going to be third-party vendors like Sovos and my competitors that are really going to come in and fill that gap.
So, Kevin, how do you think ViDA might influence other regions like Asia and possibly even the US? Do you think continents will, outside the EU, will change their direction as a result of what's happening with ViDA?
That's a great question. And again, I don't pretend to be a fortune teller or a future teller. However, having really studied this the last couple of years, my answer is a little bit twofold. I think ViDA itself will not get exported. ViDA will not expand into the Middle East or into Asia Pacific or to LATAM or to North America. However, the accomplishment, i.e., getting 30 plus countries to actually agree to anything, that's incredibly notable. And the directionality and what it's actually trying to go do around standardization, around technology and modernization. I think the fact that the EU pulled that off, we'll see a derivative or an equivalent, perhaps, right? Maybe
Hmm.
across the Latin American countries or across the Asia Pacific companies. So it won't be ViDA, but the idea of ViDA, the concept of ViDA, and the milestone that ViDA represents, I do think will influence other regions, and I do think will probably catalyze something that looks, smells, and feels like ViDA sometime in the future.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier a little bit about how now you're seeing a mobilization at more of a company level. In the I get the
Definitely.
impression it's pretty recent, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you can embellish on that. But countries announce an upcoming mandate and then they delay, for example, France. So um, do you see this as something that we just need to get used to, that there's going to be an announcement and then there's going to be a delay? And what's your advice to organizations as a result of that?
I do, unfortunately. I think that is something that, at least for the rest of this decade, we should become accustomed to, because for the most part, outside of some of the mature Latin American markets that have been at this for years and years, this is new. And anything new and foundational is going to have a lot of stops and starts. This is governments trying to actually roll out modern technology. I hope I don't sound too sarcastic here, but that's not exactly government sweet spots. And you're seeing all kinds of teething and growing pains and lack of maturity around technology platforms. You're seeing policy and political ramifications and tax authority lobbying change direction, right, et cetera. So, and then you're just seeing aggressive timelines that were probably unrealistic to be hit in the first place. So whether it is delays because I just can't be ready, or whether there's changes saying, oh, I rushed to get something out. Now I realize I want ABC instead of DEF. For all of those reasons, I think you're going to continue to see more delays. I think, again, I think ViDA and the fact that there are enough countries out there now, overall, the pace will speed up. Overall, the tolerance for delaying 3 years instead of 1 year will be shortened. And overall, we'll see an acceleration, but it's still not going to be, we will still see some delays, and we will certainly still see the teething pains and changes right once mandates go out. I think that's a given for at least the next 5 years.
So coming back to what point you made earlier, it sounds like some organizations have kind of cottoned onto this and they're just decided to get ahead of the a little bit of chaos that might be happening at a country level in terms of stop, but also get ahead because they see the business benefits.
I think that's right. I think it's both the carrot and the stick, to use that euphemism. From a carrot, it really is something I know I need to do, right? The underlying foundations that is chasing all corporations and taxpayers recognize they need to do. And there's also the stick. There is enough critical mass already. Again, now if I'm a major corporation, no matter where I'm headquartered, as boy, France really is coming on. Germany really is coming on. Poland's going to finally come on. Malaysia's on. Singapore's a big APAC company coming on. Australia and Japan and Korea are looking. There's enough that is coming on and enough that is probably within the next 1 or 2 years. The impact of my business now, if I am not ready for that, and it really is a 12 to 24 month reality now instead of a 3 to 5 year
Mm.
reality. I
Mm.
better get ahead of this and I better be ready because again, this is not just audits, right? Post filing anymore. If I get this wrong, supply chains break,
Yeah.
penalties are 10x, revenue doesn't get collected, trucks stop at the borders. The ramifications of doing this wrong in now a critical mass of countries that represent a large part of my revenue, my business, that reality has hit the corporations in the face, and they are investing by finally getting serious about this and investing appropriately. So, and yeah, all that's kind of materials over the last year. I think we've gone from
Right.
feet dragging to, oh boy, I better hurry up. Let's
Yeah.
get started. Yeah.
Right. So really the last 12 months. So so bit of a stampede. That might be a too strong a word, but I'm going to use it for now. So a bit of a stampede. Um, whereas really kind of the first 20 years of e-invoicing, 20 plus years of e-invoicing was there you could describe it as a bit sluggish.
A
So
bit of a
there's a
crawl. Yeah.
yeah, so there's a real gear switch. So question to you,
Yeah.
how are e-invoicing providers going to deal with this shift? Um, how are they going to scale up?
Boy, this is probably really oversimplified, Susie, but I think this is one of the major answers to that question. You are seeing, again, a rash of small, very specific, either functionality or country pop up. So you're seeing dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of small, not at scale, specialized or country specific vendors popping up on the one end. Hey, I'm just going to be the best darn France PDP in the world. And I'll service the French local market, and I'm great. On the other side, you're seeing companies like Sovos, who's been at this for 10 years. You saw Thomson Reuters acquire a company called Pagero to try to scale e-invoicing. You saw Vertex acquire a company called Ecosio, right, acquire an e-invoicing company. On the other end, companies like Sovos are realizing, well, a big corporation that recognizes that I'm going to have to actually satisfy 52 different tax authorities around the world that I do business in. And every one of them is going to have their own unique technical and data and reporting right requirements. And every one of those is going to need to be integrated into source systems like ERP and procure to pay and APAR. The notion of trying to actually deal with 52 country specific, non integrated, not at scale, non global, not IT, InfoSec ready vendors and all the people, process, and systems integration that would entail is literally being viewed as impossible for a larger corporation. And therefore, you're seeing the large companies like Sovos and some of my larger competitors are really pushing towards that global standardization, right? Where it's both acquisitions of companies and Sovos specifically, right? We've been building we acquired 10 or 11 over the last 20 years. And now we've got what we call a global compliance network where you just roll them out organically. And an extra country is just a couple months of work where we roll it out on top of the global platform. So you're seeing lots and lots of specialized, tiny little regional country folks pop up, and you're seeing a massive push by the big players like Sovos to go after this one single system of record or this one single platform approach. That's the biggest thing that I'm seeing from a reaction standpoint.
Okay, so it's sounding like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it is sounding like your recommendation is to have a global strategy and a global partner. I mean, maybe we can just spend a moment on that. So, recommendation and tips to end users, both for their AR invoices and AP invoices, some of the stuff to prioritize when they're looking to venture into e-invoicing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. One, and is this biased because that's what we do? Of course it is, but take that away. When things get this mission critical, right? I mean, there was a time when 11 sales directors were allowed to buy 11 CRMs. Not anymore. The corporation buys one CRM globally. Same thing with ERPs. 11 finance directors could buy their own finance tools. Nope. I buy one ERP. Same thing with HR. 11 HR directors could buy 11 HR things. Nope. I buy one HCM. This is so mission critical now and so global that this is going to go the exact same way that ERP and HCM and CRM and the other big categories are. The the ramifications of not taking this platform approach are just too pronounced, and you just can't get there without it. So we obviously are strong about that. And then, this touches a little bit on, Susie, I think you know this, being a platform, not just Sovos as the platform, but then, this notion of compliance and e-invoicing is embedded in a lot of the other ERP, P2P, APRA, OCR applications. And I think you're aware, and probably a lot of your audience is aware, that being embedded, a lot of those leading companies don't want to go build competitive technology to Sovos or Sovos's competitors. They embed, right, companies like Sovos. And I think, most of the audience is probably aware, 9 of the top 20 Office of the CFO applications in P2P, in APAR, in OCR, in e-commerce actually embed Sovos. So I'm going to take a platform approach as my core platform, and then I'm going to look at all those other things, right? OCR, PDP, order to cash, APAR. Do you in fact embed compliance and e-invoicing in it so that I've got it there too? It's a two-prong approach. So I'm going to start selecting my other vendors based on this, right? And I'm going to start selecting a platform approach rather than a country-specific approach, which is a little sophisticated. But most of the sophisticated finance and IT organizations that know what's going on here are already taking that approach, which is why we've got a large embed business inside all those other applications, like a Coupa, like a Sage, like a QuickBooks, Intuit, et cetera, is because they've got to check the compliance box too. Compliance doesn't just live in the compliance platform. Compliance lives in all those other applications.
Yeah. So coverage just sounds like a big one, and ideally a kind of a platform, an organization or a provider that can help you cover the entire footprint of your own trading organization.
And Susie, if I may, the data flow there is key too, because it's all the same data, right? All of that data ends up having, it's got to be in the audit, it's got to be in the invoice, it's got to be in the transaction, the return. If you take a different approach, good luck. You're all the way back into, let's go dump data sets out of 17 source systems and try to manually curate to get back to one system of record with data to satisfy all my internal stuff and satisfy 52 different governments. It's as much a data issue as it is a software issue, if that comment makes sense.
Okay, so the priorities in your mind. So it's the kind of the utilization of the data and the ease of access of data. It's the coverage and the ease of working with a service provider that can cover all of your territories. There's been a bit of an argument that some of the service providers are pitching price and coverage a bit too much and missing the other key features that really end users should be thinking about when they're signing up to a Sovos or another provider. So if you were going to say top 3, coverage, what would be the other 2?
Let's see. One, Susie, I really agree on the price thing. And having been at Sovos for 2 years, I will say we as a major vendor actually don't see that price as much. Like, gosh, the leading ERP vendor in the world is what, a 30 plus billion dollar company. The largest tax provider is 1 billion, and that kind of tracks. A company spending $1 million with me is spending 30 plus, with their ERP vendor. Everybody in the world agrees that this is not 1/30th as important as ERP, right? And yet that's what the investment is. So I am seeing the CIOs and tax people trying to go get justification to say, hey, our investment level is here. It needs to be here given what's coming. And it's more getting the investment into the overall function of the category way more than it is price competitiveness against the vendors. And maybe that's just us, but I really think I don't see price out there. I see getting the thing funded because it hasn't for the last 30 years because the urgency and the light bulb hasn't hit. So I think it's a funding issue inside the corporation vis-a-vis all the other things more than a pricing thing, number one. Number two, geographic coverage is very much a requirement. If I don't check the box for country number 27, I don't get the global contract. And it is really that simple because, again, the corporations have woken up and said, I am simply unwilling to give you all the good countries and then have to go sign 5 more contracts with 5 more country-specific vendors, which don't pass IT, aren't integrated, et cetera. So global coverage is being mandated by the buyer and being mandated by the big four and the systems integrators that are advising the buyer because of what I just said. Corporations refuse to adopt a platform that can't cover all the countries they need them to be in. So that's not really vendor driven, that's buyer driven. And then
Hmm.
the third one, I think, is okay, that's the core utility. Now, what about everything else? It is the interoperability, right? Again, how well do I still have to roll in a systems integrator and spend 2 years and $20 million stitching my platform into ERP, into P2P, into APAR, into e-commerce, into data lakes, et cetera? I don't want to do that. So that interoperability, embedded interaction, Susie, we're seeing that as a huge evaluation criteria out there from the buyers. And the
Right.
last one is kind of the insight reporting analytic intelligence layer. Hey, don't just do their utilities. Tell me, hey, Sovos, you're sitting on 14 billion transactions right across the world. What kind of insight can I get on that? Right? What kind of intelligence? What kind of analytics can I glean? And those are kind of emerging. What a manufacturer versus a retailer versus a CPG versus a aerospace company. The intelligence that I want to glean out of all this data is a little different based on the vertical industry, but it is emerging. So that's what I would think. Investment overall, geographic coverage, interoperability. So I don't have the big systems integration job, and reporting and analytics. If you said, how do I get judged as a vendor and how do my buyers make the buying decisions? I think those are the top four.
Hmm. Okay, great. And it sounds like the Sovos strategy is one which involves partnering with a Cooper, for example, um, the majority of the time. Would that be a fair assessment? Rather than going direct, you partner with a Cooper or a
I think
similar.
that, Susie, actually, there's a little bit of a nuance there.
Mhm.
We do go direct, right? We are that platform that is in every country and does all four of those things very robustly. We are that platform that the company can buy directly rather than having to buy 17 things from 17 vendors in 17 countries. And then instead of, right, the systems integrator having to come in and charge the company $20 million to stitch Sovos into SAP, into Tungsten Automation, into Coupa, right, into Ariba. We've already pre-embedded, pre-integrated, and actually done that right for them.
Yeah.
So whether it is you evaluating Sovos and saying all of that plumbing is done with Sovos, if I choose another provider, I have to do all that plumbing, right? That's
Right.
one. And then two, when Tungsten goes out, right, and competes against their competitors, they go out and say, oh, no, no, I've got the world leading e-invoicing platform embedded in my OCR offering, right? Or an API automation player says, no, no, I've got the world leading e-invoicing embedded in my offering. So that's a little bit different. My strategy is to be pre-connected to all those other things as a benefit to my platform, one. And two, when they have to compete against their competitors by checking the e-invoicing box in their RFP, I'm the one that satisfies that. So that's a bit of a nuance, and I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
Both
So
of them, both
I
of
know.
them are important, though. Yeah.
Right. And Sovos has got the history of having the connectors with SAP. So are these the connectors that you're talking about here with the various
Yes.
ERPs? Yeah.
Yes. Not only going to the entire SAP base and saying we are far better and far more integrated globally and functionality wise inside SAP than any other of my competitors, which has been a long standing Sovos advantage. But now it's not just ERP, it's all these other mission critical parts of the office of the CFO. So absolutely, it started with ERP and it is shifted into all the other categories like that because ERP is not enough now. Um, but ERP certainly is important, and being the best integration inside SAP for everything, especially invoicing, certainly is a competitive advantage of ours.
Yeah. Great. So last question on the kind of the partnering
Mhm.
um, and then I do want to move on. We've got loads more questions to ask you.
Sure.
So um, it's evident why there's an advantage for an end user to be working with um, one service provider globally, and I can understand why a Tungsten or a Cooper or an Ariba would want to partner with a Sovos. Um, so, but the disadvantages of that, if there are any, but I do want to explore this, is an end user looking potentially at 2 points of failure when they're working with two providers in that chain?
I think that is always the cost benefit, right? And not just with this category, but forever, right? Susie, I think that is a decades old trade-off, and I think companies continue to make it. Is there somehow in a really big economy like France, um, is there some inherent advantage? A, because that local French provider is going to know France and somehow do it better than what a Sovos or Thomson Reuters Pagero or an Edicom or a Vertex Ecosia would do. There's that question mark around like country specificity, number one. And the number two is, hey, in a big market like that, well, gosh, what if something goes wrong with Sovos or Thomson Reuters Pagero or Vertex Ecosia? Do I want to have a backup provider, right? Because there's not really any inherent advantages unless you believe that the local provider can do something that the global provider can't. So I think the real answer to that is companies are thinking about potentially I should have a backup, right, in mission critical areas, whether it's a mission critical country or a mission critical function. And that's really what I am watching buyers do. Is it's not I'm going to pass on the inherent disadvantages, the cost and the ramifications that are too severe. What I might do is invest in some insurance policy or a backup in a key functional area or a key country. So that's still incremental investment, but it's incremental investment that doesn't blow up the single system of record value prop. And it's certainly way more cost and resources effective than splitting the whole thing and replicating it, two times. So again, a little subtle difference, Susie. I hope that
Mhm.
answer makes sense.
Yeah,
But it's
no,
more about adopting a backup than it is
yeah,
about not taking advantage of the platform approach.
right, got you.
Yeah.
On the subject of your Sovos's highly acquisitive history,
Mm-hmm.
um, which has given you great advantage, right? So you've got this
It
global
has.
reach. Yeah. Now I do want to just ask from a end user perspective, to what degree is the end user getting a standardized experience globally?
Oh, finally, after after a decade and hundreds of millions of dollars and lots of blood, sweat, and tears, we're finally there. And that has been a recent. I don't know if you or any of your readers remember something that I put out early in 2024 that I cheekily called the Sovos Compliance Cloud. That was the moment when we shouted to the world that you can finally actually use one interface, right? One Sovos home, one single sign-on, one identity, one, everything. And now you can tackle this with one single thing and go at all the countries right around the world. It took us over a decade to get there, but in early 2024 we got there finally.
Yeah.
So, and
Okay.
again, we applaud some of our competitors that are making these acquisitions, right? Some of my biggest competitors have acquired e-invoicing competitors in the Nordics or in Austria or in India. They're absolutely doing the right thing because it's going to accelerate them, but they've got that blood, sweat, and tears and dozens of millions of dollars and years of hard integration and heavy lifting ahead of them. Whereas, thank gosh, we finally got that behind us. But that was a
Okay.
long, hard road.
Okay, good. All right. Now the commercial model's changed a little bit for service providers now that we're coming into these mandates, right? So it used to be
Yeah.
that you could take a little bit of money on both sides. And that is not commonly the case now. So it used to be take a bit from the buyer, take a bit from the supplier.
Yeah.
Um, how is Sovos dealing with that shift in the commercials?
Our model, at least, and I believe most of my competitors that are true e-invoicing, competitors like us, it's all buyer funded. I'm not aware of anybody that is even attempting to make it supplier funded, at least the global players like us. There may be some country specific folks that are doing it that are small that I don't know about, but everybody that reasonably can claim to at least be a regional provider, if not a global provider, it's 100% buyer funded, number one. And it's again, now that the buyers are awake, a level of simplicity has been forced on us. They want to pay one platform fee, right, for the platform, and then one incremental country fee, right? Hey, I want to pay you a platform fee, Sovos or Sovos competitor. I'm willing to pay you an incremental platform fee because I know that 20 countries is a lot more expensive for you than one country. And then I want a tiered pricing per invoice fee where I pay less as my volume grows. And I want those invoices to be fungible across all two or all 20 or all 60 countries. So we have been shown by the last two or 300, global 2000 buyers unequivocally, I will fund it. Don't ask my suppliers to. I want that simple platform per country and per invoice fee, and I want no other complexity in this. So we've certainly
Hmm.
been needed to react to that, and from what I can tell, most of our competitors, have reacted to that too, because it's very, very clear that's what the big buyers out there want.
Yeah. Do you think that's a
Real
fairly kind of
nice simplicity, though.
so yeah, I mean, do you think that's a fairly kind of classic approach to the commercials?
I
Um,
do.
you do, yeah.
I do.
So
I think if we're big enough and global enough, we literally see hundreds of enterprise and thousands of mid-market, buyers every single year. And if there was a buying pattern that was different than that, I think we would know about it. So again, I don't pretend. Maybe there is
yeah,
something out there that we don't know, but we're a pretty good representation, both geographically and market segment and vertical industry, given our scale. And what I just said seems to be common, almost across the
right,
board. Yeah.
yeah. So talking about suppliers and how in your opinion, historically this was buyer-led, but suppliers had to chip in. Now you're
Yeah.
seeing it as buyer-led, buyer-funded, suppliers not having to chip in.
That's what we're
Um,
seeing.
so and and some there are obviously countries that are having e-invoicing be supplier-led
Hmm.
initiatives.
Hmm.
Um, Tipping point for when this is going to be a project that's led by primarily AP in collaboration, of course, with AR, to when it's going to be a project led by AR with a little bit of AP in the project team.
I, I think we're seeing that now already. I think what's the analogy? I think that rock has hit the point of the hill and is starting to go down the hill. It's not all the way down the hill with a ton of steam going 100 miles an hour, but I think we've actually hit that tipping point is the simple answer. And I think we're seeing it not just with that, but then I think it's going to shake up business models like EDI, for instance, right? Classical EDI networks where that closed garden network supplier, right, anchored was the competitive advantage when the government is the network, right, or ViDA is the
Mhm.
collaboration of network, then the value of a closed garden network like that pretty much evaporates. So I think not just from a commercial, but I think we're going to see some fundamental business models, and EDI is a good example of it, where you're just going to see the fundamental value prop of things like that go away. And I don't think that's mature and mainstream yet. But to your tipping point answer, I actually think we've seen it, and I think we've seen it, in the last 12 months, and I think it's going to
Right.
accelerate. Yeah.
Okay. So there are some legacy, maybe if you want to use that word, legacy technologies or models that might collapse,
And in my opinion,
be
yes.
retired as a result.
Yeah.
So one of them being portals.
Yep.
So we've talked about the kind of the kind of pipe EDI
Yep.
connections
Our,
that
our,
might not
our
have much.
opinion is the value prop there evaporates. So yeah, I think that's an example of a model that might really be in trouble.
So that the EDI pipes themselves.
The
And what about
value of them kind of evaporates when the government becomes the network, right?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And what about portals? So we're seeing the retiring of portals. Um,
I think that continues as well, Susie, in my opinion.
yeah. So I want to come back to your overall value prop.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that Sovos was kind of born out of tax, and you're bringing your massive wealth of tax expertise to the picture, or to the party. So what's your kind of compelling proposition that you think helps makes Stovall stand out against the competition?
Gosh, at the risk of sounding like an advertisement for Sovos, which I hate to do, I think we've covered it. The fact that there is finally one platform that can be one system of record, and I can buy it. I have never been able to buy tax and compliance the way I buy ERP or CRM or HCM or others with as one system of record globally. until last year when Sovos finally achieved that. That overwhelmingly is the value prop, is that we are the only company that's really pulled that off. One, and within that, all the integration, all the country coverage and all that stuff is inferred in that. Two, the deep investment in that interoperability, right? Whether it is the best integration into SAP in the planet, whether it is the productized integration into ARAP, OCR, right, P2P players, payment players, et cetera. That interoperability and the speed and resource and lack of cost it takes for companies to go do that is the second one. The third one is that data analytics, reporting, and intelligence. It's not just dumb pipes, right? And that it's really and you know our cheeky phrase, hey, let compliance become a force for growth, right? Rather than just risk mitigation. We genuinely believe that, and we think that the analytics and intelligence is there. And I think the last thing is we have not gone the route of a lot of pure play technology companies where we've divested all the domain and subject matter expertise, because the intellectual property, really matters. And the fact that we have 150 people that sit on Jenna and sit with the lobbyists and actually influence tax authority and then know about it. And we're informing our customers. It's not just a technology roadmap. It's quarterly business reviews on what are the next 15 countries and what are they going to roll out and why, and what are they going to look at and what are the requirements going to be. So we provide that IP or that advisory work in a systemic fashion, not just the technology and not just the data. So if you said, what are the four reasons? I think those are the four reasons. And I also think, we're kind of focused. Just the little corner of the sandbox that we've said, hey, tax, regulatory, and compliance. And by the way, there's parts of tax. We don't do income tax. We don't do transfer pricing. This huge bucket of tax. We don't do ESG compliance. We don't do ISO compliance. Tax compliance, right? We're focused on this. It's so big and meaty. It's so fragmented. It's such an important thing. And we're not going to go chase shiny objects and butterflies and go try to get into. And we're not going to compete with our partners. We're not going to try to spill over into AP or AR. We're not going to spill over into OCR. We're not going to spill over into P2P. So, there's no channel conflict there. That focus on this big, huge, meaty issue that is going to continue to take years to, kind of get there. Four simple value props that align with what the customers need, and a really high level of focus on finishing the job instead of getting our eyes too big for our stomach and trying to spread into all kinds of other things. I think if you asked customers or partners why Sovos, I believe you'd probably get an answer something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. So one particular issue that end users are potentially facing, but they will face with the mandates, is that their straight-through processing rate will drop because the required data to come through really is it's tax data. So all this other great business data that shared services organizations have previously asked for, mandated from their suppliers to help with their straight-through process, they won't necessarily get it with the actual e-invoice itself. What's your solution to that, to help the end users get a richer invoice file, or invoice data, a fuller invoice data file, so that they can actually do a three-way match and their straight-through process rates won't be impacted because of the mandates?
I was not going to geek out about that on the data comment that I made. However, it's such a good question. The simple answer, and I'm going to use a kind of a tech geeky term for a second. We acknowledge that, we recognize that, and we actually actively coach the clients, on that. And we coach the services partners, whether it's a systems integrator, right, or whether it's a Big Four tax advisor, to coach the clients on this exact same thing too. We call it a master canonical approach, meaning we're going to capture all of that data, right? Not just the subset that's required, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to capture all of the fields, even though Brazil might want these 1,100 and Italy might only want these 32 and Malaysia wants these 42, right? And we're going to do that in an incredibly compliant way so that that canonical master data system of record exists, and when I made the comment about it not just being a software solution, it's a data solution, I inferred this, although I didn't want to geek out on it. But since we are, it's not just one system of record, it's a master repository of data, exactly the way you just pointed out. And then, so what? If an output to a tax authority is just this subset of it, you haven't gotten rid of the holistic, high fidelity overall data set. You've kept it, right? And therefore, you can have the rich data set, and therefore, you can do what I have said a couple times now. Forgive me for repeating, but again, it's not just the collation, right, of it in one system of record. It's what can I do with it from a reporting, from an analysis, from an intelligence, from an insight, from a business decisioning standpoint. So we think what you just asked is super critical, and that's why we've taken the approach that we have. And again, if you took it the other way and you just went source system to tax authority system A, source system to tax authority system B, that whole tax authority specific, fragmented vendor specific, no way and you know where could you pull that off. So we think what you just asked is another very, very big benefit of the approach. For the folks that want to geek out on the data side of it, you asked the most important question. It's an incredible benefit above and beyond just adhering to tax mandates.
Great. Well, I love a bit of a geek out, so thanks for
Yeah.
going into the detail there.
My
Now,
head of engineering is probably going to laugh at me when he heard my answer there in your interview and say, "Oh my gosh, Kevin, you butchered that." But that's the general gist.
that's the general gist. That's right.
Yeah,
So, e-invoicing programs moving forward, then they're not always going to be a rate like a raging success. There are going to be projects that
correct.
hit the wall once the commercials are signed. What, in your opinion, are the main reasons why these e-invoicing projects hit a wall?
One, and this is going to sound like I am being less than glowing about the buying community, and I don't mean to, but I really do think this is the big inhibitor. One, again, the function has just been incredibly underinvested in. So, hey, VP of tax, right? You've got 9 people across the entire organization, and we're just going to throw this at you. So there's just been an underinvestment at the corporation in resources, period. There's been an underinvestment in skills and knowledge and IP, right? There's been an underinvestment, the amount of money spent on the Big Four tax advisory is this, the tax technology, right? Money spent by that for the e-invoicing has been this. There's been an underinvestment in the technology, right? Again, so much of this is manual. So I'm having to go through and sort out 111 manual processes, right? Even before I can feed a tax information system, I've got a year worth of, right, just unearthing all that. There is so much fragmentation and Frankenstein in the source systems. So I've been acquisitive, so I still may have 7 ERPs. Or even if I've only got one, I've got 9 instances of it across business users and countries. The source system, it's the state of readiness from a source system standpoint, from a broken manual process, from a lack of governance, from a lack of investment in skills, from a lack of resourcing in people, and just not putting enough money at it. Those really are all of the things that a large enterprise that is ready to go take this on face. And that's why when I make the comment that the number one trend I'm seeing is the corporations finally acknowledging this and finally, right, leaning in and making the right investments. Those are what get you, right? So when we go about a sophisticated implementation, and we do again, forgive the term, but like a races, right? Roles and responsibilities and who owns what. There are hundreds of rows of things that you need to do inside your company along these lines so that you can take advantage of this. And it's not really a technology lift as much as it is how I've allowed 30 years of that fragmentation, right, and automate and manual and build up. Those are the inhibitors that, and again, boy, I hate to sound like a historian, but that's no different than when they had to do this with ERP or with CRM or whatever. This is history repeating itself again. It's just it's repeating itself now in this category.
That could probably be quite an overwhelming kind of response to some enterprise organizations who do have that 30 year of fragmentation. And now they're realizing, oh my goodness me, how are we going to ready ourselves for making e-invoicing successful? within a 12, 24-month period. I mean, that's kind of asking or I would say the unachievable unless it really is flooded with funding.
Yep. And here's one other nuance, and this is really interesting. They are waking up and making the investments internally. They're making investments in modern platforms, whether it's Sovos or whether it's one of Sovos' competitors, right? We're not the only show in town, that's for sure. Um, they're also making investments in the trusted advisors like the Big Four, for instance. The Big Four are enjoying a big growth spurt, not just in tax advisory, but in tax technology, specifically around e-invoicing. So that's a very thriving business, right? If you're in PwC or Deloitte or E&Y or KPMG, their tax technology groups are enjoying a big growth spurt specifically around this e-invoicing pressure. So the big corporations are asking for help, right? Just like they've asked for help in all the other tax related things. So that's, again, there's a comfort level there, because my tax advisor firm in the Big Four has built up the muscle, right, and can help me over here. We're seeing that as a huge trend. The other interesting thing is so much of this is being driven by finance transformation or IT modernization. So, for instance, if I'm going to finally blow up my legacy on-prem SAP that I've had around for 20 years and have Frankenstein through the moon and back, and I'm going to go to S/4HANA and adopt SAP Clean Tech, and all of that Frankenstein bastardization between my old tax engines, all 17 of them, and the ERP, that all goes away with SAP Clean Tech. So it's time to go do it right this time. And that's another thing. So you're seeing IT emerge as a buyer, not just the tax department, but IT is actually the buyer, because this e-invoicing global platform is coming as part of an SAP, clean tech cloud migration. And now you're seeing the Accentures and the systems integrators come into this as well. So it's going to be really, really interesting, because the world of IT and systems integration hasn't really, when tax was just a little point solution that a tax manager could make, and 17 tax managers in 17 countries around the world could make their own decision, you didn't really see corporate IT and the systems integrators come in. Now that a global tax system of record or platform is going alongside an on-premise to cloud S4 migration, for instance, IT is very much in the middle of that. And half the time, IT is the dog and tax is the tail. And the systems integrator, like Accenture, is the lead advisor, and the Big Four, right? Deloitte is actually the second chair. That's another big time emerging trend that is going to kind of shake everything up. But both of them result in, whether it's a systems integrator or a Big Four advisor, I am turning to my advisors for help to bridge this readiness gap. If I'm a large corporation, every bit as much as I'm turning to the platform providers themselves, like Sovos. So I'm getting help from Sovos. I'm getting help from my systems integrator, and I'm getting help from my Big Four advisor. So I'm not ready as a large corporation, but I'm getting a lot of help, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin, it's been an absolute joy. Thank
Likewise.
you. I've really enjoyed catching up with you. So thanks for your time. And
Fascinating topic. I hope we get a chance to do it again, because boy, a lot of stuff's going to happen just in
just
the next 11 months.
we'll speak again.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.